Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the People's Law School, a presentation by the Alabama Trial Lawyers. We present this program to 2 million people in Alabama, and I hope you appreciate it. We bring to you the best lawyers in America. Again tonight, we have another one, Connie Glass. Connie Glass, in my opinion, because what I know over the last 40 years watching people in her line of work is that she's probably the foremost elder lawyer in Alabama. And she's been at it for over a quarter of a century. She graduated from Alabama twice. She's been up here practicing law, and she has recently moved her office to Pansy Street. Does anybody know where Pansy Street is? That's it. She's on Pansy Street. So, Connie is going to talk to us about a subject that she knows a lot about, and I'll tell you, when my mother got sick, when my mother was old, I paid her the highest compliment I can, and that is I asked my mother to see her, and she helped us a lot in what we had to do for my mother's estate. And so I present to you Miss Connie Glass. Thank
you. Good evening. Thank y'all so much for all coming out tonight on this kind of cold night. We want to talk about some elder law issues tonight. Just a little bit about elder law. To come to North Alabama to the Huntsville Area Agency on Aging office to be the attorney for the Area Agency on Aging. I had no idea what the Area Agency on Aging didn't know what elder law was, but found my passion and my calling when I discovered what elder law really was all about. Elder law is one of the few areas, or really the only area of the law that pertains to a group of people. It's not any particular issue in the law. It's just serving the aging population. So I worked at the Area Agency on Aging for 10 years and then went out into private practice in 1997 and have been in private practice doing elder law since then. It's a very specialized area of the law. It has to do with those issues that affect us as we age. And we're all aging. If we're living, we're aging. So these issues affect all of us. So hopefully you'll hear some things in my presentation that maybe apply to you now, maybe will apply to you in the future, or perhaps will apply to you as you are a caregiver or someone interested in the care of an aging person. A lot of what I do in my elder law practice has to do with long-term care. And that obviously long-term care is the care that you need on a long-term basis as you get older. There are many different settings for long-term care, and I want to talk about a little of those before we talk about how you're going to pay for those settings, because that's what's important to folks. What kind of care can I get, and where can I get it, and how am I going to be able to afford it or pay for it? What's it going to cost? Are there going to be things that are going to help me pay for long-term care if I need it in the future? So we're going to start by talking about some of those issues, and I want to talk a good bit about Medicaid, because that's the program that people have the most concern about, that's the program that people are worried about, and that's the program that I get the most questions about in my practice of elder law. Long-term care can be provided obviously in your home. Long-term care in the home, 24-hour day, 7-day-a-week care, is one of the most expensive kinds of care that you can receive. It's one-on-one care. So when you're talking about round-the-clock, 7 days a week, that is the most expensive type of care that you can receive. You don't have the ability to spread the cost of care among a number of people, so obviously the one person is absorbing the entire cost of the caregiving. Now, if you have the means to do that and can do that for some period of time, then that's great. Home care is good. But don't be concerned that you might have to move into some sort of facility setting, because I'm a big fan of facility setting for certain people, and we'll talk in a minute about why, but a lot of my clients' children come to me adamant that no matter what, they're going to keep mom at home. They're going to keep dad at home. And that might not always be the best choice, not only because of cost, but because of socialization. And that's the big key with facility setting. The first level of care in a facility setting is assisted living care. If your family member cannot live at home and get the care that they need at home, they may need to move into we always encourage the least restrictive setting, and that might be assisted living facility care. Assisted living facilities are those facilities that house a number of people. Most of the people have their own private living quarters, but they take their meals in a community setting. They have community activities within the facility, and they offer basically supervision for that person, so the person doesn't have to live alone, have a need that's not being met. I was talking to a lady today in the office about assisted living care, and they're spending lots of money to try to keep mom at home. And we started talking about assisted living care, and she was talking about, that mom's lonely. She loves for the kids to come over, bring the grandkids, but they aren't able to do that often enough, and so she's by herself with one caregiver most often during the day. That is a lonely setting and a lonely existence. And we talked a lot about socialization in assisted living and how that really can be a benefit to people. So again, don't be concerned and alarmed if your parent or loved one has to move into an assisted living facility, because often after a period of transition, and there is a few weeks of a period of transition, the person begins to thrive and actually do better. They're taking medicine on a regular basis, they're getting appropriate medical care, and they're being socialized. They have the socialization with their peers, people of their own age, people of their own memories, and they have a sense of community within that assisted living. So I'm a big fan of assisted living facilities. There are also in Alabama what we call specialty care assisted living facilities, and those are just like regular assisted living, only they have a higher level of staffing because they're for persons with cognitive impairment. If you have dementia, Alzheimer's, some sort of cognitive issue, then you may have to go into a specialty care assisted living just because of the specialized services related to that cognitive impairment. People who have Parkinson's-related dementia, some sort of Alzheimer's disease, alcohol-related dementia. There are many types of dementia, and when a person has that significant cognitive impairment, they may need that higher level of care in specialty care assisted living. Assisted living, whether it's regular assisted living or specialty care, is care that's paid for out of pocket. It's private pay care. You're either going to have the ability to write a check for that kind of care, or you're going to have long-term care insurance that covers that care. Medicaid does not cover assisted living care. So if you run out of money and there's not another source of payment, then you generally are going to have to move out of the assisted living setting unless somebody's going to pick up the cost of that tab for you. Because Medicaid, the government assistance program, is not available for assisted living care. It's only available for nursing home care. Obviously, the next level, if you can't stay in assisted living for whatever reason, the next level of care is nursing home care. The nursing homes in Alabama are governed both by federal and state regulations. They're licensed by the Alabama Department of Public Health. And all of the residents in nursing home facilities, again, are either private pay or they have long-term care that's funding the cost of their care, or they're under the Medicaid assistance program. We do have 4 veterans nursing homes in Alabama. We have one in the Huntsville area. There's also one in Bay Minette. There's one in Alexander City, and there's one in Pell City. Pell City is the newest one in Alabama. Those facilities are for veterans, and the cost of that care is mainly covered through the Veterans Administration. There's some small contribution by the veteran, but you don't have to worry about Medicaid for those facilities because you don't have to apply for Medicaid in a veterans nursing home. The only drawback for veterans care, particularly here in the Huntsville area, is that there's about a 6 to 8 month waiting list to get into the veterans nursing home. So it's not something you can just decide, oh, well, Dad needs to go in the veterans nursing home and go there next week. Unless you've been on the waiting list and you've come up on the list, then you're not going to get placement that quickly. So if Dad really needs nursing home care, he may have to move into another nursing home and then wait on that placement for the Veterans Administration. All right, we talked about home care, we talked about assisted living care, we've talked about nursing home care. How are we going to pay for all this? As we get older, who's going to cover the cost of that care? As I told you, the assisted living care, whether it be regular or assisted living, specialty care assisted living, is private pay. You've either got to pay it or you got to have insurance that pays it. Your Medicare coverage won't pay it. Your Medicare supplement insurance won't pay it. Your traditional health insurance policies won't pay it. The only type of insurance that pays for that extended care is long-term care insurance. Generally, you have to buy long-term care insurance while you're young enough and healthy enough to meet all the qualifications to get the policy. They're looking at conditions that are going to cause you to need chronic, or they're looking at chronic conditions that are going to cause you to need care in the future. They're not looking necessarily at conditions that are going to cause your death. It's not like life insurance. As you age, as you get older, and as you begin to develop some of these chronic conditions, the policies become more expensive, and they also, at some point, you may become uninsurable. They may be beyond your reach as far as being able to pay the premiums for them. So you could reach the point of being uninsurable by a long-term care insurance company. We recommend to our clients that when they reach the age of 55 to 65, they begin to look at long-term care insurance. It needs to be part of a good estate plan. So unless you're independently wealthy, unless you've got plenty of money to pay for your care, or unless you are really a person of limited means and you could quickly qualify for Medicaid assistance, then long-term care, it should be something you look at as a part of a good estate plan. Medicare benefits. A lot of people are under the impression that if they go into a long-term care setting, that Medicare is going to cover the stay in a long-term care setting. Medicare coverage is only available in a short-term setting. Well, obviously your Medicare coverage pays for the hospital, but when you go into a rehab facility or a nursing home, then Medicare coverage is only available for up to 100 days for each spell of illness that you have, and that's defined within the law as what spell of illness means. In order to get any Medicare coverage in a nursing home for rehabilitation or skilled care in a nursing home, you have to stay at least 3 days in the hospital, and then you have to be admitted to the rehab facility or the nursing home facility within 30 days of being discharged from that 3-day hospital stay. And you have to be discharged into the facility for the same condition for which you were hospitalized. Then you can get up to 100 days of skilled care, rehabilitative care in a nursing home or the rehabilitative section of a nursing home. Not everyone gets 100 days. Everyone assumes that when they go in, they're going to get 100 days. Not everyone gets 100 days. You may get 40 days. After 40 days, you may not need any more rehab, or you may not be making progress with your rehab, and you may be terminated from Medicare coverage in that rehabilitative center or that nursing home center. If you do get the 100 days of Medicare coverage, Medicare only pays fully for the first 20 of those days. So days 1 through 20 are fully covered through the Medicare program. Days 21 through 100, there is a copay for which you are responsible. The copay this year in 2015 is $157.50 per day. So that is the copay for days 21 through 100. Now, some of you may have Medicare supplement insurance that covers that copay, but you need to know that before you go into the facility, because not all Medicare supplements cover that $157 a day copay. If you are insured through the federal long-term medical insurance program, if you have federal Blue Cross Blue Shield, they cover federal Blue Cross, I can't say that word, federal Blue Cross Blue Shield covers 10 days after Medicare's 20. Medicare covers 1 through 20, and then the next 10 are covered through the federal Blue Cross program. After that, then you're on your own for the $157 a day. So they only cover, you're covered for the first 30 days. So you need to know with your Medicare supplement insurance whether it's going to cover those copays under the skilled care or rehabilitative care coverage. Yes, sir?
Long-term care insurance cover the $157 copay?
That's a great question. Alan's question is, does long-term care insurance cover that copay? It depends on your policy. Many long-term care insurance policies have a 90-day period that you have to meet before the coverage begins. So when you purchase your policy, your long-term care policy, you have to choose. Do you want that 30-day waiting period, 60-day, 90-day, 100-day? So if you've chosen a policy that has, for example, a 90-day waiting period, then it's not going to cover the $157 a day. If you choose one that has a 30-day waiting period, then it'll begin to pay on the 31st day. It can begin to pay on the 31st day. So it really depends on your policy. You have to choose a shorter waiting period to cover the copay of $157. Was there another question in the back? Okay. Okay, so that's Medicare coverage. And as far as the spell of illness, you heard me use that term earlier. You can get multiple Medicare stays in rehabilitative coverage or skill coverage in a year. What has to happen is when you go in under Medicare into a skilled nursing facility, from the last day that you receive that coverage, there has to be a 60-day break before you can receive that coverage again. So if you break your hip, go to the hospital, go to the nursing home, rehab for a couple of months, go home, you're able to live at home for 3 or 4 months and do great, and then you fall again and you break your arm and then go back in the hospital, back into rehabilitative stay in the nursing home, you can be on Medicare coverage again. So you can do that multiple times during the year as long as there's that 60-day break from the last day to the first day of receiving coverage. Okay? So there has to be that 60-day break or else it's considered the same spell of illness. All right, any questions about that before we move to Medicaid? All right, everybody's good. Yes?
Question, does the prescribing physician have anything to do with that 60-day? If you fall and break your leg and you have an osteopath guy send you into rehab, and then you fall and damage your shoulder or neck and impair your ability to walk, and you get a neurologist to prescribe, do you still have that same 60-day window with different prescribing physicians?
The question is there still a requirement of that 60-day break, even though it could be different conditions for which you go in? You might go in with a broken hip, and then the next time you go in a month, you go in maybe with something wrong with your neck. Is there still a requirement for that 60-day break? Yes, there is still a requirement for that 60-day break. There has to be a 60-day, the spell of illness is still ongoing if it's not outside that 60-day window. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
The 100 days, is that calendar days or is that the days that they actually do physical therapy?
That's a great question. The question is the 100 days actually calendar days or is it days they're actually doing rehab with you? It's calendar days. And anybody who's ever been in rehab, you know they generally don't do rehab on Saturdays and Sundays and sometimes on holidays. So you're not getting rehab every one of those days, but it is actually calendar days. Okay? All right, let's talk about Medicaid because that's the program that everybody has questions about. Everybody has heard all kinds of stuff about Medicaid. One of these days I'm going to sit down and write everything that everybody tells me about Medicaid and put it in a book because it's so entertaining to listen to folks who've heard that Medicaid does this, that, or the other thing. Let me tell you what Medicaid is. Medicaid is a needs-based program. It's a form of welfare, and I know we don't like that word, but it is a form of welfare. It's a needs-based program. It's provided jointly by state funds with matching federal dollars. In Alabama, most of our dollars are federal dollars. Our match is small compared to the federal input into our program. The program was founded for states to be able to provide medical assistance to people who didn't have other means with which to provide for medical care. So it was founded as a needs-based program originally. It was never intended to be a long-term care program, but that's what it's turned into a lot, particularly in states like Alabama where a lot of us don't have long-term care insurance and a lot of us don't have incomes, retirement incomes that will cover the cost of long-term care in a facility. In Alabama, the Medicaid program is the largest source of payment for nursing homes. Over 70% of nursing home residents are on Medicaid. Now, that's not just poor people who went to the nursing home. That's people like all of us who went into the nursing home maybe with some money in the bank or some means to pay, but they've stayed there long enough that they've run out of money and they've had to apply for Medicaid assistance. So almost 3/4 of us in the nursing home are on Medicaid. So this program, if you have a family member that goes into the nursing home, or if you end up in the nursing home, this program is going to touch your life in some fashion. And some member of your family, if they end up in the nursing home, may end up having to look at the Medicaid program. So you need the information about what Medicaid really is. There are actually 3 tests to qualify for Medicaid in the nursing home. One is a medical test, and I'm not going to talk about that because I'm not a medical person. Don't pretend to be. I don't play a doctor. So you have to meet the medical test to be in the nursing home. Medicaid's not just going to pay your way in the nursing home just because you decide one day you don't want to live at home. You go check yourself into the nursing home. Did y'all see that lady that's on the cruise ship? Her retirement is living on the cruise ship. I want to be her. I think that was so great. Although at the cost of that cruise ship, I'm not sure I could afford to be her for very long. The tests that I deal with, the requirements that I deal with for Medicaid are 2. They're the financial part of the requirements. So there's the medical part, that's between the doctor and the Medicaid agency. The financial part, there are 2 tests. There's an income test and what's called a resource test or an asset test. I'm going to tell you about the income test, but I want to tell you right up front before I even tell you about it, income is never a barrier to being on Medicaid. If somebody tells you that you don't meet the income test for Medicaid, that's okay. That's a fixable problem. It's an easily fixable problem. Okay? All right. The income limit right now for Medicaid, if you have income of more than $2,199 a month, you don't meet the income test for Medicaid. So let's say that you're going to the nursing home and your income is $3,000 a month. That's all you have. You don't own a house, you don't have money in the bank, you don't have anything else. You've got $3,000 a month, and that's what you have in the world. And you go to the nursing home and they say, sorry, you don't qualify for Medicaid, your income's too much. What do? There is something called a qualified income trust. If you create, or an agent under your power of attorney can create for you what's called a qualified income trust. They come down to the office, we prepare it, they sign this trust document. Your agent takes the trust document down to a bank and they open a new checking account. The only thing they're going to put in that checking account is your income. So when your income comes in for the month of February, they're going to take it out of the bank, it goes in, and they're going to put it into this income trust account. At the moment it goes into the income trust account, the resident in the nursing home has no access to it or control of it because it's in this account that their name's not on. At that moment, as far as Medicaid is concerned, their countable income is 0 and they meet the income requirement. Okay, it's just a little magic way to do this. Now, what happens to that money that's in that income trust account? The person who's on the account pays it over to the nursing home just like they would had it never routed through that income trust account. It's a conduit for the income. That's all it is. Income in, income out. Income in, income out. It's an artificial way to make you income eligible for Medicaid, but you have to have it if your income is over the limit. Yes?
No waiting period on that. It can happen immediately.
Yes, we did. I did an income trust this morning for somebody that were qualifying for Medicaid for February. So the income's still sitting in, actually, yeah, the 2 income checks went in over the weekend, so we're going to put them in the income trust today. Hopefully he did that. We gave him directions on how to do it. Yes?
How long will that remain available for people to do?
How long will the income trust be available? I don't have any reason to believe it wouldn't always be available as long as there's a Medicaid program. I'm sorry, I'm not sure I'm understanding what you're asking me.
Seems like the expenses of the Medicaid program can go up dramatically if basically everyone can.
I understand what you're asking. The question is, if everyone can be qualified for Medicaid, how many people can be on Medicaid? We're limited in Alabama by the number of nursing home beds. We're not building new nursing homes, so we're limited to the number of people that are in nursing homes right now, and only those people can be on Medicaid. So as long as they don't expand the Medicaid program to include assisted living or home care, then our program is self-limiting in that we're limited by the number of people in nursing homes. Yes, sir.
Your income is $5,000 a month. Does that smoke and mirrors trick still work, or?
Yeah, the question is, if your income is $5,000 a month, does that smoke and mirrors, I'm going to use your language, that smoke and mirrors trick still work? Yes. Your income can be any number of dollars and you can still be on Medicaid. Now, if your income is enough to pay your nursing home care, you don't need to be on Medicaid. If you've got $8,000 a month coming in and you can write a check for the nursing home bill, don't bother with Medicaid. But if your income is $5,000 a month and the nursing home is $6,500 a month and you don't have any more money anywhere, you're going to have to be on Medicaid, or else you can't stay there unless somebody's going to make up the shortfall. So yes, we do income trusts for people with $5,000, $5,500 a month, but we haven't talked about the other tests you have to meet. There's an asset test you have to meet too. It's not just income. So you can't have $1 million in the bank and just meet the income test. Okay? Question, yes.
Why is it being restricted on how many nursing home beds are available? Is it
The question is, why is Alabama restricting the number of nursing home beds? I'm going to tell you what my opinion is. My opinion is so they can limit the Medicaid dollars. It's dollars and cents. It comes down to how many, if we had 100,000 Medicaid beds, they've got to pay for 75% of those to be on Medicaid. No, ma'am. No, ma'am. The federal will match as many dollars as we have. Alabama doesn't have the matching dollars. We're poor.
Is this this income trust, is this the type of trust that you wait until the event happens to set it up, or do you set it up in advance and you work out it?
That's a great question. The question is, do we set up this income trust in advance? Absolutely not. You never want to set it up unless you have to. We usually want you to try to set it up the month before you need it. I don't like to do them on February 2nd to get eligibility for February. That makes me nervous. I really wish we could have set this one up last week, but it didn't work out that way because I didn't see the folks in time. But yes, you don't want to do it in advance. You absolutely do not want to do this in advance because you don't want your income going where you don't have access to it.
So there'll be another place for you, or some kind of a nursing home available for you.
There might not be.
You do it a month in advance.
Well, the question is there going to be a nursing home bed available? You don't want to do it unless you're going into the nursing home. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. This is not a planning trust. This is a trust simply to make you Medicaid eligible. So you want to meet all of the Medicaid requirements as far as assets are concerned before we deal with the income issue. Okay? Yes.
So if there's a finite number of Medicaid beds available and we reach that number, there becomes a waiting list for people?
There is a waiting list at most nursing homes, particularly in North Alabama. Yeah.
What's the typical time period for a waiting list?
The typical time period to get into a nursing home?
And like that a person may spend on a Medicaid bed waiting list?
There's really not a typical time. It's just when a bed opens up. Now, if you're not picky and you're willing to take a bed, usually you can get a bed fairly quickly. It's easier to get in from the hospital because you got the hospital social worker calling around looking for beds for you. I don't have a lot of clients who just simply cannot find a nursing home bed, but I've had clients on waiting lists from home for several months if they were not already in the hospital. Yes, ma'am.
Home refuse your admission because they'd rather have a private pay patient.
The question is, can the nursing home refuse your admittance because you're a Medicaid patient and they'd rather have a private pay patient? The nursing home cannot discriminate based on source of payment. That is a federal regulation. The nursing home can't discriminate against you. Now, if you are going to be a Medicaid patient and you're coming in from home, the nursing home can require you to pay the first month in advance. The reason is there's a 30-day period that you have to be in the nursing home before you can apply for Medicaid. So if you go into a nursing home and you die on day 28, Medicaid's not going to cover that 28 days you were there. You have to be in the nursing home for 30 days. Now, once you apply, if you would have been eligible for the first day you went in, Medicaid can pay back retroactively. But you have to be in that nursing home facility for 30 days. Yes.
Well, you would agree all nursing homes are not created equal. Some are better than others.
And you might could get in the worst nursing home in the city right away, but you might have to wait longer to get in a better nursing home. Is that correct?
The premise is that some nursing homes are better than others, and you might have to wait to get in a better one, but you could get in a bad one really quickly. I'm not sure I will agree with that premise, because all but 2 of the nursing homes in Huntsville are Medicaid facilities, and I wouldn't say those are bad facilities. It's my experience, I've been doing this almost 30 years, it's my experience that at any given moment there's going to be a problem in a nursing home. And it usually comes from staffing. They're understaffed, they have bad staff, and when that problem resolves itself, usually the care's good. But unfortunately, that bad staff may pop up somewhere else, or another facility change management and they lose a great number of people, and then it takes them a while to get back up to staff. So most problems that I see in nursing homes stem simply from staffing issues, whether it's understaffing, untrained staff, bad staff. Sometimes it can be underpaid staff. Taking care of people in nursing homes is a hard job, and staff don't always get paid appropriately. You'll find, the lowest paid, the newest hires work on nights and weekends. That's when you find a problem. My aunt was in a nursing home, and we couldn't find an aide for love or money on Sunday night at 10 o'clock. And she was in what would be considered one of the better nursing homes, but we could not find an aide. I thought I had dropped off in the twilight zone looking for a staff person at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night. They were short-staffed, and they were doing the best they could do.
How can 2 nursing homes in Huntsville not have Medicaid patients?
They're private facilities. 2 nursing homes don't have there are 2, and there's some in a lot of cities. There are 2 nursing homes in the Huntsville area, the Huntsville metropolitan area.
Those names?
I would prefer not. If you'll see me afterwards, I will. I don't want to start giving out names of nursing homes in front of everybody. Okay, let's talk about the other test real quickly. The other test, there's an income test, and then there's a resource test. Income test we can fix. We can fix income. Let's talk about resources. Resources are those things you own: stocks, bonds, savings bonds, cash, money in the bank, CDs, IRAs, 401ks, annuities, rental property, a car more than one. On your handout, you see the list of things that Medicaid will allow you to keep. Everything else generally is countable. For the most part, if you're single, everything you own has to be spent down to $2,000 or less for you to qualify for Medicaid. That's not $2,000 a month income. That's $2,000 or less in assets. So your stocks, bonds, cash, IRAs, 401ks, annuities, rental property, most often your home, unless it falls under one of the exceptions for Medicaid, more than one car, cash value of life insurances. Most of those things are going to have to be liquidated, if not all, spent down, and by spending down, I mean spent on you, until you reach that $2,000 threshold, at which point then you can apply for Medicaid assistance. Okay? Spending down is not sending your grandchild to college. Spending down is spending the assets on yourself. Yes?
That's state specific, is that correct?
The asset limit is, I don't know of any state where the limit is more than $2,000.
The question is I thought that there were in some states where you could have rental properties and you could keep that rental property as long as there was an income.
Well, if you look on, it may not be in my handout, there is a rule on rental property. It's probably not my handout because it's very particular. Under Medicaid, the value of the rental property has to be so low that most people's rental properties don't fall under that value. So if you have really, really cheap, inexpensive rental property, it might fall under the value, but most people don't have rental property that inexpensive. Okay? There's certain things that people forget about. I call them hidden assets for lack of a better word. Joint accounts. A lot of people are under the impression if they put their child's name on the account that half of the dollars in that account's the child's, half's yours. And if you go to the nursing home, the child can go take half the dollars. Nope, wrong. Medicaid looks at all the dollars in every account that has your name on it as being available to you. This could even apply to your child's account. If your name's on your child's account, Medicaid's going to look at those dollars as being available to you. Then you got to go prove that those dollars are not really yours. You got to prove the source of the funds. So if your name's on your son's account and you're aging, you probably ought to get it off, because otherwise your son's going to have to prove that just because your name's on there doesn't mean those dollars are yours. So Medicaid presumes if your name's on it, the dollars in the account are yours. Yes?
You said get it off. How about the 5-year rule?
If the dollars are not yours in the first place, there's not a transfer. So the 5 years just doesn't apply if you're not transferring dollars that are yours. If you're within the 5 years, you'll have to prove that those dollars in the account were not yours. But hopefully you can prove that anyway if your name was just on there for convenience. Cash value of life insurances, that can be an asset to you. There's a very complicated rule that I'm not going to spend a lot of time telling you tonight. There's sometimes the insurance is excluded, but most often the cash value of insurance is going to be countable. So if you've got a policy that has value that you can get the dollars out of it, you may have a $10,000 policy that's got a $7,000 cash value, and if you cash that policy in, the company would write you a check for $7,000. That $7,000 is just like it would be money sitting in the bank. So you're going to have to get those dollars, cash that policy in and get those dollars. So cash value of life insurance is something that people don't think a lot about. Heir property, that's H-E-I-R, not A-I-R. Heir property, you may own a 1/4 interest in a family farm with your other 3 siblings. Your interest in that property is a countable interest to you, so that is also an asset. Savings bonds. I have so many clients with savings bonds, they stick them in the drawer and they forget about them. If you go to the nursing home, if you have savings bonds, those are an asset. Even though you've forgotten about them and you hadn't thought about them in 20 years, they have a value and they're going to have to be cashed in. Yes?
Life insurance, if you have life insurance with cash value and you have to cash it in, so you lose your life insurance.
You can't, yes ma'am. If you cash in a life insurance policy, you do lose that life insurance. You lose the death benefit because you've cashed it in prior to death. Okay?
You mentioned heir.
Yes.
If you're the beneficiary of somebody's will.
They haven't died, so you don't own anything yet.
Okay, so you don't have any assets.
Yes. If you're the beneficiary, if your mom and dad have left you the family farm, but mom and dad are still living, and they've written a will that says, when we die, Joe gets the family farm, you don't have it, and it's not an asset to you till mom and dad are gone. Because at any point they could change their will and leave it to Sue. So Joe may not get it. So you can't anticipate interest.
Okay.
Or mom and dad could go to the nursing home and they have to sell the family farm to pay for their own care. So if it's just an interest that you might get if somebody's death because you're named in a beneficiary, or you're as a beneficiary on a life insurance policy, or you're a beneficiary on somebody's IRA, that's a future interest. It's an anticipated interest that you may or may not get. So until it's realized, it's not an interest.
Well, let's take that one step further. So you've qualified for Medicaid, you're getting Medicaid dollars. Now Uncle Fred passes away and his life insurance policy pays you $100,000.
Now you're going to come off Medicaid
Until you burn off the $100,000.
till you spend that down.
Okay.
That's right. So you can, yeah, I'm with you. Question? Was there a question? Okay, yes.
When you're a joint on a CD,
Same thing as a bank account. The joint CD is the same as a bank account. If you go to the nursing home and your name's on a CD, all of the dollars in that CD are presumed to be yours. If they're not yours and you can prove they're not yours, then obviously Medicaid's not going to require you to use them for yourself. You have to prove the source of the funds. Let's say I won the lottery and I put my I won $100,000, not a lot. I won $100,000 in a lottery and I went and bought a CD and I put your name on it for convenience, just so something happens to me.
so you have the insurance.
You have to prove that the source of that $100,000 check was a check to me, and I just added your name on it, and you've never accessed it, you've never used it, it was never yours, and those dollars came from me. It's hard to prove sometimes. If the city's been open 20 years, you may not can prove the source of the funds, so it's presumed to be yours. Yes?
You referred to the 5-year rule, but could you clarify the transfer funds?
Yeah, I will. If you'll give me 1 second and talk about spouses, I'm going to jump over to the transfer rule. I've talked about single people, that you have to spend everything down to $2,000. Let's talk about spouses. What if one of a couple goes into the nursing home? You don't have to spend everything down to $2,000. The spouse at home is going to get to keep something. Yay. They're not going to impoverish the spouse at home. So what happens when one of a married couple goes into the nursing home? The spouse at home is going to get to keep certain excluded assets. One of the most important things is the home. As long as the spouse is living in the home, then the home's excluded. Medicaid just ignores it. Right? They don't take a lien on it. They're not going to make you sign it over, make you sign a lien. It's just excluded. So the home's excluded as long as the spouse lives there. You can have a car, you can have some burial funds. Everything else that either of them owns, it doesn't matter whose name it's in, is added up. And then there's a formula. It's on page 7. The spouse at home, the community spouse, gets to keep the greater of $25,000 or 1/2 of those countable resources up to a maximum of $119,200. So it's generally half with a bottom limit and an upper ceiling. So you never get to keep less than 25 unless you don't have 25 to start with. And you can never keep more than $119,200. So if you and your spouse together own your home, your car, and $500,000, the spouse at home gets to keep $119,200. And the spouse in the nursing home is going to have to spend the rest. If y'all have got $200,000, the spouse at home gets to keep $100,000. The spouse in the nursing home has to spend $100,000. All right, so it's 1/2 with that upper cap of $119,200.
And that doesn't include the home.
And that $119,200 does not include the value of your home, your house and your car. Those are excluded entirely. Okay?
So what happens if the second spouse is living with one of the kids and the house is vacant?
So what happens if the spouse at home can't live in the house anymore, has to move in with one of the kids or to assisted living, and is not living there in the house, and the house is vacant? Then the house becomes a countable asset. The one in the nursing home is going to come off Medicaid until the appropriate number of assets are then spent down. If it's vacant, it's countable. It's only excluded as long as there's a spouse living in it. Can you get you a better spouse? I'm not going to touch that one with a 10-foot pole. Yes.
When all this is happening, how does it unfold? How much time do you have to liquidate rental houses and things like that before bills start becoming unmanageable?
It's a good question. How does this practically happen? If you're a single person and you, God forbid, have a stroke and all of a sudden you're in the nursing home and your wealth is tied up in rental property, for example, and you don't have a lot of cash in the bank, and you spend your cash in the bank and you still hadn't sold your rental property, who's going to pay the bill? What's going to happen? If you're a single person, as long as the real property is listed for sale, then Medicaid can go ahead and begin to pay and just take a lien against that property dollar for dollar of what they're paying out. So every month when Medicaid writes the nursing home a check, they've got a lien for that amount of dollars against that real rental property. It's not quite that simple if it's a married couple. If you're one of a married couple and your spouse goes to the nursing home and you have no cash and all of your wealth is in rental properties, and let's say you have $200,000 worth of rental houses, but you really have no money in the bank, how are you going to get your spouse on Medicaid in the nursing home? Right now, Medicaid won't approve your spouse for Medicaid if the value of those rental properties is in excess of the $119,200. So you may have to borrow against them. to get some of the equity out so you'll have cash. So it works a little bit different with married couples. So there could be a cash flow problem. Okay? All right. I promised you to talk about the transfer rules, and let me do that really, really quickly. All right. The biggest question I get, bar none, is what can I give away or how can I protect assets from the nursing home? Here is the basic Medicaid rule on giving things away, transfers. That's the magic word in Medicaid lingo, transfers. When you apply for Medicaid, Medicaid requires you to produce financial records for 60 months back, from the date of application back for 60 months. They look through all of your financial history, and if within that 60 months you have given away or transferred something or sold something for less than its value, then all of those dollars are added up, whatever you've given away for less than its value. It's all added up. And then Medicaid's not going to pay for your care for as long as those dollars would have lasted you. That's how the transfer rule works. You apply for Medicaid. Medicaid looks back for 60 months. If you or your spouse have given something away, or you sold a $100,000 house for $50,000, or you gave your car to your grandson, then whatever those dollar values are, if that would have lasted you 6 months in the nursing home, then that's how long Medicaid won't pay for. That's called their penalty period. All right? The penalty cannot begin running until you would be otherwise eligible for Medicaid. So you're single, you go to the nursing home, you spend all your money down to $2,000, you apply for Medicaid, Medicaid says, darn, we would have approved you except for you gave away X number of dollars and now we're not going to pay for your care for the next 3 months. So somebody's got to come up with the dollars to pay your care for 3 months until Medicaid kicks in.
You keep saying your financial records. What records are you talking about?
Bank statements, copies of checks, CD documentation, if you've cashed in life insurances, the history of the life insurance and the check that you received, where it was deposited, if you've sold property, closing statements, deeds, if you've cashed in an IRA, you've got to have written documentation from the financial institution of what you cashed in, where those dollars went. So everything financially, mostly it's bank statements and canceled checks, but it's, again, if you've sold stock, you have to have history of that.
Most of us are on electronic statements now, and it costs quite a bit of money to get statements from 3 or 4 years ago printed up.
Yes, the last client I had that requested 5 years of record paid $600 to get them from the bank. $600.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
$1,000 for the month in the nursing home, it's a relatively small price.
Yeah. You have to have them. If you don't produce the records that Medicaid asks for, they can deny your application for failure to provide information.
So cash is sort of invisible during this time. If you had a garage sale and sold $500–600 worth of stuff.
If it's personal property, that's one thing that Medicaid just doesn't have the manpower to track down. They can't go in your house. They don't have the staff to go in your house and inventory your couches and chairs and lamps and tables. They're looking for money in the bank, stocks, bonds, CDs, real property, cars, savings bonds. They're not worried about your couches and chairs and lamps and tables.
They don't know about Aunt Matilda's teapot that you got.
They don't know unless you tell them about Aunt Matilda's teapot, and they're not going to ask you about Aunt Matilda's teapot. They'll ask you about collections. They ask about coin collections, gun collections, artwork, expensive jewelry, furs, those kind of things. They'll ask you about those things, but they'll ask you about farm equipment. But they're not going to ask you, do you have a teapot that your great Aunt Matilda owned that may be worth $5,000? Because as far as I'm concerned, it's an old teapot. And unless you go sell it, you're not going to get $5,000 for it.
So you say for transferring assets for less than the fair market value?
Yes.
What about just straight out checks that are written as gifts to grandchildren?
That's a transfer. Checks to grandkids are transfers.
Less than fair market value.
Well, you're not receiving anything in return. It's a gift.
On how much can be given away?
No, Medicaid has no de minimis amount that you can give without penalty. I've got an application pending right now. They're asking for documentation of a $260 check.
If you just write yourself a check for cash to operate on a monthly basis, they count that?
They can. The checks to live on each month are sometimes a problem. Medicaid, when we do Medicaid applications, sometimes you just have to use common sense. If we have a client who took $500 out of the bank every month, and there's no checks to the grocery store, and there's no checks to Rite Aid or CVS, and there's no checks to Walmart and Target where all of us, write checks, it's obvious that that $500 is going for those kinds of things. But if you took $500 out of the bank every month and there's still checks to the grocery store and to Walmart and to Rite Aid and CVS and Target and Belk's and all.
One big check to Visa.
They want the Visa statement to see if you're charging things for other people. And we have clients that do that, whose kids take the credit card and charge their own expenses. So yeah, Medicaid's looking for things that went to someone else that you could have used to pay for your care.
Do your frequent flyer miles count?
No, frequent flyer miles don't count because you can't convert those to cash as far as I know. If you figured out a way, let me know. The transfer rules are the biggest issue that we have in getting people qualified for Medicaid. So those are difficult rules to live by. We encourage our clients to write checks or use debit cards. Debit cards are a magic thing. The good thing with debit cards is you don't have to come up with a check because it shows up on your bank statement as to where it goes. So I'm a big believer in using the debit card. And I know some people are reluctant to use their debit card, but you can always use it as a credit card and not have to use your PIN number. I finally convinced my mom before she passed away that the debit card was her best friend. She could just use her debit card and not have to keep up with the checkbook because she was not a great balancer of her checkbook. So with the debit card, it came out automatically and she knew. The transfers can be cured. Basically, you can get rid of the transfers if the assets return to you. So if you gave your son and daughter or son and daughter-in-law $10,000 as a down payment on their house, and then you unexpectedly go to the nursing home and all of a sudden you're penalized for that $10,000 gift, if they're willing to give that $10,000 back, it does away with the penalty, and then you just use the $10,000 to take care of yourself. Medicaid's serious about these transfer issues. I mean, this is not something they just go, well, I know you can't come up with how you spent that $10,000, so it's okay. They're really serious about this because it's a needs-based program. Some workers are more serious than others, but they're going to look at checks to cash, checks to family members, cash withdrawals, anything that looks like it's used for somebody else. Another big issue we have with transfers are sales of property for less than fair market value. A lot of people are selling property below fair market value just to get rid of it because they need a quick sale. If you're selling a $100,000 house for $80,000, you've made a $20,000 transfer. Medicaid uses the tax appraised value of the property. Whatever the tax assessor has it appraised for, that's the value that Medicaid uses because that's the only value that's a public record. If your house is appraised for $100,000 or $200,000 and it's not worth that, and you're going to have to sell it, you need to get the tax appraised value lowered before you sell it, because that's the value that Medicaid's going to use, is that tax appraised value. Whatever the assessor has it appraised for. In Madison County, you can go online and look at the appraised value online. It's there it's public record for everybody to see. Okay, question?
Is the asset analysis done by Medicare a one-time thing, or do they revisit that every so many years?
That's a good question. This asset analysis, is it a one-time thing? Once you're approved for Medicaid, then you've got an annual review that you have to do once a year. Once you're approved on your 12 months later, then you have to just do a very short form to Medicaid telling Medicaid what you have still and what you've done with those assets during that 12-month period. And if you've acquired something, that's when Medicaid does their readjustment. You're supposed to report it when it happens, but if you don't, they're going to catch it on the annual review. But the annual review is pretty straightforward. Okay, I have been told that I have to read my poem now. Every year I end with this very nice poem called Warning. It's by a nice lady named Jenny Joseph, And it's one of my favorite poems, and I hope that you enjoy it too. Warning by Jenny Joseph. When I am an old woman, I shall wear purple, with a red hat which doesn't go and doesn't suit me. And I shall spend my pension on brandy and summer gloves and satin sandals, and say we've no money for butter. I shall sit down on the pavement when I'm tired and gobble up samples in shops and press alarm bells and run my stick along the public railings and make up for the sobriety of my youth. I shall go out in my slippers in the rain and pick flowers in other people's gardens and learn to spit. You can wear terrible shirts and grow more fat and eat 3 pounds of sausages at a go, or only bread and pickles for a week, and hoard pens and pencils and beer mats and things in boxes. But now, we must have clothes that keep us dry and pay our rent and not swear in the street and set a good example for the children. We must have friends to dinner and read the papers. But maybe I ought to practice a little now, so people who know me are not too shocked and surprised when suddenly I'm old and start to wear purple. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Brinkley.